poke, 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 bleed, and then poke, 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 bleed. One more, poke, 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 bleed. The new sword lance has a disgusting secret, and by disgusting, I mean delicious. Also, final boss spoiler warning. Hello, my fellow tarnished. Welcome to this, technically 2 builds in 1, as I will be giving you an alternate version later on with the new sword lance. The remembrance weapon from Mr. Gravity Borman, and indeed it's unique in that it's the only remembrance weapon that is Ash of Warable, and thus affinityable to any of the affinities you desire. This is exciting because it lets us, well, get very experimental in its use. It has the lancy, heavy running triple hit while having the heavy thrusting sword R1s, and it makes for a really fun moveset. There's a lot you can play around with. But one thing I noticed is that it has a really weirdly high amount of status when set to a status. Seriously, at my current stats, 45 arcane, technically you can go to 60 for even more scaling before it drops off a cliff, but 45 to 60 is very little impact. For example, the blood loss would go from 159 to 166. In any case, 159 on the sword lance. On Bloody Hellish, only 92. On something like the Godskin Stitcher, set to blood also 132. Nearly 30 less than the sword lance. That is huge. So, playing around with it, something like Blood Tax, which was buffed a while ago now, but still, it's one of my favourite Ashes of War, a long-reaching, rapid, jabbing attack that heals you actually shockingly a large amount while applying a lot of damage and pressure, but most importantly, bleed build-up. Every single jab is hammering in said bleed, and against 90% of enemies, this is 1 bleed per use of Ash of War, which is obviously ludicrous. And I love this because I've been wanting to use Bloody Tax in a properly strong build for a long time. I've messed around with it in the past, but having tried essentially every Ash of War with blood scaling and how it feels to play with the sword lance, this one has by far and away come out on top as both the most powerful and the most fun, well-rounded playstyle. And just to really hammer home how much utility can be found in the healing that this thing does, watch this. Just 2 uses of it, and look at my health. Absolutely powering up. It's so genuinely ridiculous. You can get away in so many instances just not using a flask and instead taking the opening that you're given and powering up your health bar again. It's really, really great. So essentially we end up with a really base, powerful weapon with a weirdly overtuned amount of status, hitting rapidly at long range, showering us in bleed procs, while also massively healing us to the point of not even needing to use Flask a lot of the time. It all comes together to be fantastic fun, powerful, and I really cannot recommend it enough. So without further ado, let's get into the nitty gritty. Stats then at level 150. Your vigor at 60, as it always should be. Mind is up to you. This has been fine for me. The skill isn't too FP intensive, so you can spam it a fair amount without having to drink a flask, so that's all good. Enough endurance to medium roll with the setup, and then any more stamina you want to comfort. Enough dexterity and so on to make the minimum requirements of the weapon and everything that we need. Faith at 25, intelligence doesn't matter, and then arcane at 45. After that, pour every spare point into strength until it's at level 54 or you're out of points. After that, into arcane. Equipment, the sword lance with blood tax on it, set to blood. Any 0 weight seal in your offhand, just to use to cast the usual buffs. The white mask for that 10% extra damage when bleed happens, which is of course happening a lot. If you want a super min-max, then yes, Rakshasa armor for the extra 2% damage per piece is going to be your friend, and with the amount of healing this does, you actually quite counteract the extra damage taken quite nicely. We want Alexander's, as we are primarily using a skill here. We want Rotten Winged, as we're attacking a lot very quickly, so this very rapidly raises to its maximum boost, which is hefty. And then Bloodlord's Exaltation for that 20% extra damage, essentially permanently, as we're bleeding so much. Now, this conspicuously empty slot is for you to customize to your needs. There are a couple options. If you want to play a bit more offensively, pump out min-max damage, then you want Millicent's Prosthesis to, again, build up that rapid hit damage. Though I would definitely recommend the more usual, which is put on your Dragon's Crest, so we take less damage, and this way the healing that we're getting from the bloody tax is even more efficient, because it's healing back smaller amounts of damage, meaning that you really can just use this instead of drinking a flask to top yourself off and keep getting in the boss's face. Then we also have another option that I'll get to in a moment. In your Wondrous Physic, you want Thorny Cracktear for that multi-hit power, and then the Blood-Sucking Cracktear. Normally, I don't like primarily recommending this, but uniquely in this build, because essentially every time we attack, we're healing a good chunk of our health, you actually significantly heal for more than the Blood-Sucking drains from you, so it's essentially just a free global 20% damage increase for the entire boss fight, and it's a really nice draw of playing this bloody tax setup. That said, if you still don't want to use it, then simply whack on the usual Opaline Hard tier for the extra defensives and you will be fine. When it comes to your spells, yeah, you just want your Golden Vow and your Flame Grant Me Strength, and then anything else that you find helpful that you have the stats for, like Bestial Vitality, as there's no reason not to have it. Now then, I want to share with you two other versions of this build. The first is maximum healing. So instead of the blood-sucking tier, we want to put on this, the Crimson Sapping tier. This is 0.75% health per time you damage the enemy, which is quite often with blood tax. Now don't get me wrong, normally this tier is pretty but adding it on top of the bloody tax heal is quite fun. And then to complement this, what you want to do is swap one of your talismans, either your Dragon Crest or your Rotten Winged, to the Godskin Swaddling Cloth that also gives you a big % chunk of healing every 5 hits. Between this, the tier, and the bloody tax itself, you are healing colossal amounts of your bar back, and that can be really, really entertaining and potent too, while still consistently bleeding, well, every time you use it essentially, so you've still got huge damage output. Then finally, I do want to point out a non-bleed version of this. As I say, the status on this is so good that you really can take it in any direction, so it makes a wonderful Poison Flower Blooms Twice option. That 183 poison buildup is excellent, and then we can detonate it with the Poison Flower Blooms Twice. Now, of course, in this, you want to swap your helmet to the Mushroom Crown, and you want to allow for the endurance difference to not be heavy load like I am with it, and then you want to swap this over to the Kindreds of Rots, and then you would put in your offhand the Poisoned Hand, so we get the extra little bit of damage when the poison actually triggers, and now you've got a really solid Poison Flower blooming setup, which is just lovely. And the best way to make this happen is to use the running charge attack for the triple hit, which will poison most things straight away, and then go into that sweet Poison Flower detonation. So with that all said then, ladies and gentlemen, it's very much straightforward. Just use bloody tax whenever the boss is open for a bloody tax. Don't be afraid to use your regular thrusting two-handed pokes as well. They are quite quick, very damaging, and if you have an opening that's not as big as bloody tax needs, that is very nice too, and will still colossally build. And then past that, if you ever have probably above 65-70% health remaining, then just use the bloody tax to heal and don't worry about a flask, and you will also be in a really, really good position. It's very straightforward, it's just incredibly effective and fun. When it comes to how to get the new items, as I will assume you either know or already have all the base game stuff, it's essentially just the sword lance, which, as we know, is the remembrance from the Wild Boar Rider that you fight right here when you get to it out to the back gate of the Shadow Keep. So, yeah, that one is quite straightforward. Past that, the blood-sucking tier to increase your damage while draining your health is from the furnace golem that is sat right here. You throw a giant furnace pot into its head, it'll activate, and then you kill it and enjoy your reward. Lastly, for the heal when you deal damage tier, it's from the furnace golem right here, the one that tries to blast you when you go across this bridge right from the ancient ruins east Grace across here, and then you will find it and kill it right here. Other than that, then, it's all base game stuff, which I do find quite charming here, because obviously it's all revolving around this new weapon, its power, its reach, and its weirdly high status build-up, and then the engine is what's come before, and the sum of its parts is so much less than the whole, and I really, really enjoy it, and I hope you guys do too. Look forward to the next build, as there will always be many, many, many. I absolutely love coming up with them for you guys, and yeah, for now, like if you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.